All done. All silent. Going. Gone. So congratulations.
Welcome to the Current Market Insights podcast, brought to you by Harris Partners Real Estate. Each episode, we chat with real estate author and industry leader Peter O'Malley to discuss the current property market conditions and provide insights to assist you on your property journey.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Current Market Insights. I'm your host, Kieran O'Brien, and with me again this week is my good friend, Mr. Peter O'Malley. Peter, hello.
G'day, Kieran. Great to be with you.
Great to see you, Peter. I want to jump straight in today and have a chat to you about an article I know you've written recently regarding underquoting in real estate. It's a topic you and I are both passionate about. And the title of your article is Underquoting 20% is the New 10%. If you can, Peter, I'll get you to take us through what the crux of the article is and what the implication is for people out there in the property market.
When I first started in real estate, Kieran, it was pretty much accepted. I'm not saying it was right, but it was accepted across the industry that agents would quote 10% below the vendor's reserve price or what was likely to be the reserve price. And that was a consistent measure around the industry. So it gave buyers a sense, if you like, of where the property was likely to land on auction day. Sometimes the auction might only go up 6 or 7% above the price guide. Sometimes it might go through the 10%. But by and large, home buyers had some sense of where the vendors were thinking on the day and what the agents had led the vendor to believe the property might sell for on auction day. When agents, not all agents did this, but it is a reality because I know it for a fact and we all know it for a fact, when agents were short of buyers, they would plant dummy bidders at auctions to fuel the bidding. And the regulators cracked down on that pretty intensely in around 2005 from memory. And agents then quite rightly said to themselves, clearly putting a dummy bidding at an auction is not a smart way to go, and we need another method to fuel the auction system. So from that point onwards, what we found is that agents started quoting 15% below the vendor's reserve, and then it was 20% below the vendor's reserve. And we're seeing some extreme examples now where agents are blatantly quoting as a guide price in the auction campaign what turns out to be up to 25% below the vendor's reserve. Now, as a home buyer, if you're going to bid on a few different properties with a few different agents, you're going to see that some agents will underquote by 5%, 10%, others will underquote by 15 to 25%, as we've just outlined. So what that does to a home buyer in the marketplace is give very little credibility to what any real estate agent says the likely selling price is going to be, because they're all using such vastly different pricing strategies, Kieran.
Okay, so there's a fair bit to unpack there, Peter. I wanted to just touch on the point around dummy bidding. So you mentioned it was outlawed around 2005 and the regulator cracked down on the practice. Do you think that dummy bidding is still occurring at auctions in Australia and particularly in New South Wales today in 2024?
Look, I don't have any evidence that it is happening. Now, maybe real estate agents are not planting dummy bidders anymore. What I will say is that buyers' agents have told me that they believe the vendors, in some cases, will plant dummy bidders at the auction as a means of creating additional competition. I think agents would rather run the risk of underquoting to attract more buyers into the bidding to give the illusion of competition, even if that buyer competition is below the vendor's reserve, than take the outright risk of planting an absolute plant at the auction.
Is the penalty from the regulator that severe that they won't engage in dummy bidding?
It's not that it's severe, it's that if you were named and shamed for planting a dummy bidder at an auction, that reputational-wise, that would be extremely damaging.
Because I know as real estate agents, we've already got such a high reputation that we hold on to, Peter, week after week.
Indeed.
So my question for you then, and I'm sure a lot of people out there would have the same question. If we have underquoting and we have so much concern around what the price is going to be at a property, why as an industry do we not just shift to asking price campaigns across the board?
I accept that competition drives the price higher than would otherwise do so if it was just a straight for buy price. Every home is unique and every sale takes its own path, and it is the agent's job to maximise the sale price on behalf of the vendor. So I don't think we should take that right away from the agent, but if the agent's method of getting the best possible price from the marketplace is to mislead people into bidding on the respective property, that's a problem. Where it's also a problem, Kieran, is that if all of the agents are using an accurate price guide to maybe a 10% enticement to come along to the auction in the form of the underquote, and then one agent in town suddenly starts underquoting by 20 or 25%, well, that agent's going to attract the best buyers to their listings and make all of the other listings in the marketplace look overpriced. So what they inadvertently do is then force the other agents in the marketplace to also underquote by 20% so that the price guides in the marketplace are aligned. And that's the point we're at now. We've essentially got the entire industry underquoting at a ridiculous level because it's been a race to the bottom as far as what agents have been underquoting.
So as an agent who operates in a pretty competitive market, how do you compete week to week? And what's your, how do you handle the fact that other agencies are underquoting by up to 25% locally?
Yeah, look, it is extremely difficult. There's no doubt about that. And I think you've always got to quote a price that the vendor is aware of and agrees with you quoting to home buyers. And we have had the situation where we've been quoting, say, $1.5 million for a property. There's no interest. We advise the vendor to sharpen the price guide to 1.4. Then 3 people want to buy it at 1.4 and it sells for 1.55. That sort of thing has been happening in the marketplace to us because when we say to the buyers, our price guide is 1.5, they say, yeah, we know how you real estate agents work. You tell us 1.5, but the vendor really wants 1.7. It's like, no, we're telling you 1.5 because that's what the vendor wants. Yeah, that's what the last 3 agents said, and that didn't finish real well for us either. So the reason that we're making the underquoting issue a big issue is because it's reflecting on everybody, and not every agent wants to go out there on a Saturday, Kieran, and tell people that this property that could sell for $2 million has got a price guide of 1.6 because yeah, okay, when you quote 1.6 and you sell it for $2 million, it's great to make the sale. But as a realtor, what you've got to keep in mind is you're probably burning half a dozen buyers along the way. And over time, that's not good for your reputation in the local community. And that's where some of the agents that are doing what we're talking about here in the article, underquoting by 20%, are not doing themselves any favour in terms of their long-term reputation.
Yeah, I must admit, I spoke to a client at an open home just on the weekend and proffered a price guide to them for the property that we were in. And their response was, in fact, I know your agency and we're thankful that you guys are reasonably accurate with what you have to say. And I must admit, it's quite demoralizing in some way to consistently go out there and say to buyers, look, welcome, here's the property, here's what we're hoping to achieve for the seller, and they tell you to bugger off because they think you're either lying or you're just being deliberately misleading to try and engage them in the process, which would be defeatist for us, I guess, in the grand scheme, because we can't achieve the best for our vendor if everyone thinks we're not telling the truth.
The longer a buyer is active in the market, the more they'll get to understand how each respective agent operates at that point in time and how they're running their pricing campaigns. But yeah, certainly home buyers fresh to the marketplace feel like they're in a washing machine early on where one property will have an auction guide of $1 million and sell for 1.3, and then the next property will have an auction guide of $1,050,000 and sell for 1.1. And that's why we've always said to home buyers that you should disregard any price guide that the real estate agent, including Harris Partners, gives you, and you should make your own determination of what current and fair market value for that property is. So regardless of what the agent is telling you, your true north is the underlying value of that asset. Again, as we've said in our article, this has made purchasing real estate so complicated that it's little wonder that we've seen the rise of the buyer's agent to the degree that we have, because it's suddenly become nearly a full-time job just purchasing a property.
Yeah, it highlights a couple of interesting points. One, you really can't afford to skip research. You cannot go into property purchasing with a nonchalant, haphazard kind of approach, because you'll either get taken advantage of or you'll miss out on property consistently.
Or you'll overpay.
Or you'll overpay, which we have talked about before. A couple of questions then before we move on. I wonder, with the rise of the buyer's agent, how do you know, though, as a member of the public, that the agent you're engaging is not somehow in collaboration or cahoots with all the other sales agents around just to manipulate you for a better price?
Well, look, that's a great point that you raised, Kieran, because the relationship between buyers agents and certain selling agents is far too close for comfort. And the reality is the majority of buyers agents have come from being, beginning their careers as vendors agents, and they morph into buyers agents. So it comes back to this point that you've just raised, and that's research. And just as if you were selling your home, you sit down and you interview 3 or 4 selling agents. If you are going to employ a buyer's agent, you want to try and find someone with strong reviews online, and not one of those reviews from the real estate websites, which are just about glorifying the real estate agent. When we're talking about real estate reviews, if all of the reviews are positive, you know that they're placed and manufactured reviews. And what you want is sometimes the best feedback about how a real estate agent performs is the negative reviews, because what's coming through in the negative reviews is a tenant, a home buyer, someone who acted belligerently with the real estate agent, tried to put it over the real estate agent, and the agent held their line, and therefore the only option open to the consumer was to go and write some nasty, poorly based review about the real estate agent. So I think Google is the right place to assess reviews rather than, as I say, some of the real estate websites which are nothing more than glorification of the agent. And if you are going to employ a buyer's agent, you should interview a few of them and ask them the hard questions like you've just posed there. How do I know your relationship with the selling agents is not to my detriment?
Yeah, some really good advice, Peter. One final question then before we wrap up. I think it's in Victoria, and I'm happy to stand corrected here, but in Victoria they use published auction reserves before the auction goes live as a method of countering underquoting. Do you think that's something that may come to New South Wales, and do you think that it's something that would be worthwhile, welcome, or would it be actually detrimental to vendors, given that our duty is to maximise the outcome for them?
Yeah, the thing about setting a public reserve too early as a vendor is that you're having to set your bottom line before you've seen the bidding in the room from the buyers, and there are some buyers that will form their opinion of value much closer to the auction date than say a week out, if you like. So I think that there has to be a fundamental value placed on every property, and the agent's marketing price guide has to be within cooey of that, so to speak. And at the moment, when you've got agents, the article you refer to talks about a client that we know, Barry, who, not his real name, by the way, but we'll call him Barry as we did in the article. He bid at an auction with a price guide of 1.9. He bid 1.9 on the day. The auctioneer, as the opening bid, he bid 1.9. The auctioneer said to him, we've been instructed not to take any bid under 2 million. He said, but I've just bid the price guide that you've been quoting to the marketplace for the last 4 weeks. And the whole crowd laughed at him like, who's this guy? He doesn't know what he's doing. So bidding the agent's price guide made him a laughing stock at the public auction. When it passed in for $2 million to Barry, he was told that the vendor's reserve was $2.4 million.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Now, if real estate agents think that's good business, good luck to them, but that will come back to bite them in the future. There's little doubt, because you just can't conduct yourself in that manner. That's just crazy.
Yeah, it beggars belief, and it makes me wonder how anyone could trust, the industry more broadly. Really good recap, Peter, and it's a great article for anyone listening. I strongly recommend if you jump on the Harris Partners website, you can find a copy on there. As we move along, Peter, I read an article just today actually talking about, it was a bit of a puff piece, but the crux of it was talking about how families on the ground are indicating they have reached their peak affordability in terms of rentals. And the article suggested that perhaps we've reached the zenith, where any extra increases aren't going to change anything for landlords because people just can't afford to pay rent anymore. Do you think that is a reasonable position? And do you think we've actually reached that point yet?
No, I don't think that's a reasonable position to form. A couple of things there. That I think the article did go on to say they think it'll peak in the next 2 to 3 years, so there is further growth in place. The other thing in the next 2 to 3 years, wages will continue to increase, which will give people a capacity to pay more. You've heard the RBA talk about during COVID, there became a lot of single dwelling households and lower person households, and that will increase by way of shared households, which gives people collectively the ability to pay more. And then finally, if you are priced out of a suburb, people won't like this, but the market will inadvertently force certain people who are finding rent unaffordable an ability to downgrade the suburb or the dwelling type that they're in. So I thought it was a pretty lame article. I thought it missed the mark, and I thought the person who wrote it doesn't understand how markets work.
No, I think it's a pretty fair summary, Peter. I know I like to keep our listeners updated on what's happening in the rental market because it is, to me, it's a bit of a barometer of the market more broadly. It is very seasonal.
Writing articles like that doesn't help anyone because it gives people a sense there's a relief on the horizon. AMP, as we go to, as we record here tonight, go to air as such, have put an article out saying that on the current immigration numbers and the current building numbers, there's a shortfall of 200,000 dwellings across the country in the next 12 months. That's worth talking about. Trying to placate people and write an article saying the rental market's close to peaking is nonsense. It's nowhere close to peaking.
Yeah, they're just trying to fill their daily quota of articles, I think, Peter.
Yeah.
Perfect segue then. We talk about immigration's impact on the market. Let's move into our market wrap as we sort of, wrap the episode up today. What are the numbers looking like this week? And, is there any relief on the horizon for buyers out there?
Look, there's not. I think the market may have kicked again, Kieran. We saw some surprisingly strong clearance rates the week before Easter. There wasn't many sales over Easter, but there was enough there to suggest that the weekend before was not an aberration. The demand was fairly decent. So the Saturday just gone, the 6th of April, was the first weekend after Easter. Another healthy weekend. We had some really, really busy open houses, people wanting to make offers. Again, you can see here belting rain in Sydney tonight and was all weekend. Vendors are suddenly reluctant to come to market, and those vendors that are on the market are a little bit surprised at how many people are coming through. So we're going into that seasonal period now where stock's a little bit tighter, but as we've just discussed, the skilled migration is still pouring into the country, along with people that are naturally in a buying cycle locally as well. So the fundamentals for the market kind of look a little bit stronger than they did a month ago in early March with too much stock in the new year, as we discussed at the time. Clearance rates took a dip, but they're looking they're looking strengthening at the moment. So when we go to last weekend, the auction clearance rate on Saturday on SQM Research's numbers was 52.1%. 125 of the 975 auctions were rescheduled, so they're not counted in that clearance rate. You can debate whether those 125 rescheduled auctions should be counted as failed campaigns or not. Interestingly, of the sales that were recorded as successful auction campaigns from last weekend, Kieran, there was a neat 50-50 split again between those that sold prior to auction and those that sold at auction under the hammer, and that was 254 each.
That's interesting. So we've actually seen a bit of a trend there where the number selling before auction has just steadily kind of decreased into now a period of somewhat parity. Well, obviously parity this week, but pretty close to parity. I just want to step back to a point you made there that we're entering a cycle where it is traditionally a bit of a slower period for listings. How does that compare, though, this year right now with this time last year, knowing that we've had a start to a year where there's been an exponentially higher number of listings or, much higher volume of stock on the market? Is it still going to be high but low given the period, or is it likely to come back to seasonal traditional norms?
Look, we've always said that economics trumps seasons, so we've never really been huge on seasons other than the lack of stock through winter creates a great selling opportunity for vendors. But if we go back to the last two rate hikes in July 2023 and November 2023, last July the RBA increased rates and stock levels surged. And I remember right through the industry, all the real estate agents were saying, I can't believe I've got this much stock on the market in winter. I never have this much stock on the market in winter. And both from volumes and prices, our best performance in 2023 was last winter, straight after that rate hike, where a lot of vendors came into the market and there was buyers there to buy them. Then the market settled down and stock levels actually underperformed during spring. So that was another counter-cyclical trend for the season, if you like, is low stock levels, relatively speaking, last spring compared with high stock levels last winter. Then the RBA shocked the market by increasing interest rates in November. And then suddenly there was another massive wave of stock. As agents said, I've never had so much stock coming to market the week before Christmas, i.e. every time the RBA increase interest rates, it causes a surge of stock. The new year started with those vendors that wanted to sell but couldn't get to market late last year, came on the market very early in January and February. So again, most agents were dealing with more stock, and we called it as such as this at the time. Stock levels were very elevated in January and February this year right across the city as agents suddenly had all these new year listings. They've cleared in the run-up to Easter. Coming out of Easter, we're now sort of 4 or 5 months since the last rate hike. There's talk of rate cuts. I think that could be slightly premature, but there's a belief that rate cuts are coming, and suddenly stock levels on the market has really tightened, putting the pressure back on buyers, and that's where we are right now in the marketplace.
So given the cost of living is still high, and there is definitely talk out there that rate cuts are coming, and there's so many people, I imagine, holding on for that, do you think that if we don't see a rate cut come in September as initially predicted, we may see another glut of stock come on as people have tried to hold on and just can't do so anymore?
Look, I think what those trends with the correlation there between higher stock levels immediately after rate hikes tells us is I think every time the RBA have hiked rates, it shakes a new wave of vendor out of the market. Now, that vendor is not necessarily and far from being homeowners. It tends to be people selling off investment properties to protect the family home. So are people's finances broken? And that's what you've spoken to there, is that if rates stay where they are, will there be a crunch point down the track? And the only answer to that is, are people running at a cash flow negative scenario where their outgoings are more than their income, but they're surviving by living on existing savings, of which Australians had record saving rates coming out of COVID. And that'll only become evident in time.
Yeah, okay. I feel like that probably is the scenario for a lot of homes, which is why I asked the question. And we've certainly said in the past that holding rates is effectively as good as a rate hike for many people. So I am interested to see what happens.
It is the case for many people, unfortunately, and your heart has to go out to those people. But that's not to say that that's then going to dominate the market trend, because the employment market is so competitive at the moment. If you're an employee looking to hire people, that you find yourself giving pay rises in a lot of instances to people. So that's giving people who are under some mortgage stress further runway as well, is that they can go out and get a higher paying job in many instances.
Yeah, really good insights, Peter, and I think a really great episode today. It's always great to touch on what's happening in the market, but I really love the topic of underquoting. I hate to see it in the industry, and I really hope that we can see some reformation sometime soon and some punitive damages that actually, have an impact on agencies out there who are doing the wrong thing.
Well, look, what we've always said about real estate marketing is that if you want to attract competition, you want to attract the market to your property, just quote market price and they'll turn up. But due to agents deliberately underquoting by 15 to 20%, they've distorted that equation where it's nearly at the point, if an agent's not underquoting, their listing looks overpriced to the buyers. And it's now been driven to the point of hideous, where we have to acknowledge that the reforms that were introduced, the underquoting reforms that were introduced in earnest in 2015 have not worked, and the regulators need to take another look at it clearly.
Yeah, certainly. Really great discussion today, Peter. I thank you again for your time and look forward to chatting with you next week.
Thanks, Kieran. All the best.
And thanks to everyone for listening to Current Market Insights. We look forward to talking with you next time.
Thanks for joining us on the Current Market Insights podcast, brought to you by Harris Partners Real Estate. the podcast providing real estate insights you won't find anywhere else.